Ivory is going to install its stuff that it needs to run in a couple of different places. So you've got your standalone app, and that's going to be called, Ivory Standalone on the Mac, or it might be called the Ivory Cantabile version on the PC. It's got the plugin itself, and those plugin files will go in a variety of places depending on your audio DAW that you're going to use, your digital audio workstation. So I'm using Logic, so mine go into the audio units subfolder in the system. That all happens automatically. But the last piece is the Ivory library files and your Ivory folder. And that's going to be really important because a lot of us don't want to keep our samples and our large libraries on our main hard drive. It can kind of rip up your hard drive a little bit, and you might have a separate SSD that's even faster than your main one, or your main one might be taken up by your apps and your system software, and you store all your samples elsewhere. So knowing how to manage your Ivory library is going to be really important. Now, if I open up the folder, first of all, you'll see in my applications folder, I do have the Ivory library tool. And that's going to be important because once you've installed everything, you might decide to move that library, you might decide to move that folder, or perhaps you've upgraded and it's in a different place now. You can always open up the Ivory library tool, and that's going to ask you where you've installed the Ivory library, and then it will scan it for you and verify that everything is working as it should be. So if you look right now, Ivory is currently set to look here. That's where I'm storing mine. I have a separate hard drive, a flash drive, a nice quick SSD called samples, and that's where I put it. So I'll hit OK. If it's not there, this is where I can change it, and I can tell Ivory, hey, I moved that file. I moved that folder somewhere, and you can tell it where to go. So I'll hit OK, and once you see, it just scans it, it finds it. It even checked the plugins for me. If I scroll up, you'll see where it put the plugins. There we go. Hey, I found your AU plugin. I found your Pro Tools plugin. I found your VST plugin. I found the app. I found, it just scans to make sure it finds everything. And then it checks all the different pianos that I have installed. And I can actually verify each piano individually if there's a problem. It'll scan all the libraries and samples and find them. So that Ivory library, if I quit here, I'll show you where it is. I can go to my samples drive, okay, and I go to Synthagy, and this is where I put it, Ivory items, and there they are. So the Ivory lib files are the actual samples. If I had to guess, they're pretty big. Let me click on just one of them. Yeah, 2 gigabytes for there, 2 gigabytes there. So that's the meat and potatoes. That's the main files. Now, if I scroll down, I've got my documentation if I need my help. And if I scroll down even further, I've got the presets folder. And that's where a lot of important stuff for Ivory is stored. If you're ever struggling with Ivory and you have to work with tech support, which does not really happen often. I've used Ivory for many, many versions, and I haven't had to really ever get in touch with them. But if you did, this is where the files are that they might tell you to alter a little bit. So if you've saved something, maybe you accidentally saved over something, like a velocity map, and all of your MIDI velocities are kind of wonky for your keyboard. You can erase the default velocity map here. You can erase the default session, the default program. That's the troubleshooting place. And you shouldn't do that on your own. You should only do that working with the Ivory tech support team. But this is where they're going to tell you to look to change it. And here's where the programs are. So if you make your own program, or, if I go to the user folder, that's where they'd be. So if I decide to make my own cool combination of the Bosendorfer piano, but with, a synth layer and also with a certain velocity level that works well with my keyboard, it would save there. And that's where you can back them up if you want to. So if you want to, or send them to another computer, if you want to have that same preset on another computer or something like that. So this folder, the Ivory items folder, becomes really important. It's important that you know where it is and how to access it and how to change its location using Ivory tools, the library tools, if you decide to move it to a different, faster hard drive or to your main hard drive or something like that.